Rock Your Socks. Today we're going to do some more formation testing. We're going to see how specific formations line up against other formations. Right now we currently have a Charles Martel with Sun Tzu on the map with 25,000 T1 infantry, and we have Arch formation on it. My opponent as well has 25,000 T1 infantry in Arch formation. This will be our control battle, and right now we're going to try to keep everything the same. So my opponent for right now is going to keep using Charles Martel Sun Tzu with the Arch formation and no armaments on there. We also do not have any armaments on there. So what we're going to do is we're first going to test Arch versus Arch, and then we're going to do Wedge versus Arch and Hollow Square versus Arch. And we'll see how the Sev wounds we receive and the Sev wounds we give compare. So right here, we'll come out here and we'll throw our 25,000 T1 infantry. And then we're going to attack our opponent here. Alright, so let's see how our control did here. First, let's line up our next march. Like I said, we're going to do Wedge versus Arch next. We're going to steer away from like echelon, line, triple line, and the V formation. They just do not apply here. And we want no armaments. So we'll put our 25,000 T1 infantry out here. Let's look at our Sevs. We received 3,194 Sevs here, and we gave 10,918 Sevs to our opponent here. So let's see if this wedge formation will give us more Sevs against our opponent and receive less Sevs. Let's see how they compare. Alright, let's see what this report looks like. Alright, so we received 2,974 Sevs compared to 3,194 Sevs. So we received a little less Sevs. In the Arch formation, we gave out 10,918 Sevs to our opponent. Now, our opponent only received 10,473 Sevs. So we received less Sevs. Our opponent received less Sevs. Our total units remaining was 21,806. And we had 22,013 remaining with the wedge formation. So overall less Sevs, a little bit more remaining, which makes sense. Alright, so once again our opponent has 25,000 T1 as well in the Arch formation. So let's see how the Hollow Square performs against the Arch formation in comparison to the other two formations that we used previously, the Arch and the Wedge. Alright, let's see how this report looks. Alright, so we received 3,279 Sevs, and our opponent received 10,950 Sevs. Compared to our previous two reports, this one does not seem as good as the others. So, when we used arch formation, we had 3,194 sev wounds. When we used hollow square, we received more sev wounds with 3,279. Our opponent received 10,950 sevs with the hollow square, and with the arch, they only received 10,918. So just slightly more with the hollow square. Compared to the wedge formation, where we received less sevs and gave less sevs. So at this moment in time, our testing is not completed. Right now, we're going to run the same march, and we're going to switch it back to the arch formation. And what we're going to do, because all things were not equal, is we are going to have our opponent bring out the same march again, but we are going to have our opponent bring it out with the wedge form. Alright, so our opponent's out here now, and they switched to the wedge formation. So let's go ahead and see how this goes. Okay, so arch versus the wedge. We had 3,096 sevs, and we gave out 11,232 sevs. Compared to our first report here, we had 3,194 sevs, and we gave out 10,918. So right here, the arch formation performed better against the wedge formation. So now let's change it up, and we're going to switch our formation back to the wedge. Alright, let's get into the wedge versus the wedge. Alright, so let's check out this report. So we received 3,251 sevs, and we gave out 11,199 sevs. So let's see how this compared with the previous report with the arch versus the wedge. So 3,096 sevs and 3,251 sevs. So we received more sevs. Our opponent received 11,199 sevs, and they received more sevs with the arch. So the arch versus the wedge compared better than wedge versus wedge. So now let's bring out the same march again, and we're going to use the hollow square. Alright, let's see how this report looks. Alright, we received 3,332 sevs, and we gave out 11,213 sevs. Let's see how it compares to the wedge versus the wedge. 3,251 sevs for the wedge, and 3,032 less sevs with the hollow square compared to the wedge versus the wedge. Now we gave out 11,213 sevs, and we gave out just a little bit less sevs with the wedge formation. Alright, so now let's look at these same numbers, these 3,032 sevs, and compare it to the arch formation. So the arch formation had 64 more sevs, and we gave out 11,232 sevs, which is 19 more sevs. So right now, I would say going up against the wedge with this specific march cannot be clear enough for this specific march. I would use probably the arch over the hollow square, just because it's receiving less sevs is better than the little bit more that we gave out. Well, the arch, 3,096 sevs compared to 3,032, and we gave out a little more sevs. So right now, hollow square and arch, they're about a coin flip when going up against the wedge. So right now, we're going to do one more round of testing. Alright, so we're going to bring out the same march once again, and we're just going to switch it right back to the arch formation. And what we're going to do is we're going to have our opponent come out in the hollow square formation. Alright, let's see how this arch formation stacks up against the hollow square. Alright, let's see this report. So the arch versus the hollow square, we had 3,236 sevs. And our opponent received 11,238 sevs. So our other arch had 3,096 sevs. So that was less sevs with the arch versus the wedge. Our arch versus the arch, 3,194 sevs, which is still slightly less than the 3,236 that we received here. Our opponent received 11,238 sevs, 11,232 sevs. So that's really a break even there. So the difference was just less sevs over here with the arch versus the wedge. So I'd still take the arch over the hollow square. And then our arch versus the arch, 10,000 less sevs. Less sevs. $11,238 sevs given. 11 break even. And then our arch versus the arch was less sevs. So I would take arch versus wedge right now. So our arch versus the hollow square, we got more sevs, which is what should happen with these march types. Alright, so let's check out our next formation. And let's change it to the wedge. Alright, let's check out this report. So wedge versus the hollow square, we received 3,188 sevs. And we gave out 11,273 sevs. With the arch, we received 3,236 sevs. So with the wedge versus the hollow square, we received less sevs. And our opponent received 11,273 sevs. And with the arch formation compared to the wedge, just slightly less. So right now, the wedge performed better against the hollow square. Alright, so now we have one more round of testing with these types of commanders. So we're going to run the hollow square formation versus the hollow square formation. Alright, for our last test here was hollow square versus hollow square. So we received 3,581 sevs and gave out 12,039. Compared to our wedge formation, we received more sevs with the hollow square formation than the wedge formation. And we received more sevs with the hollow square formation versus the arch formation. So our opponent received 12,039 sevs, which is more sevs than the wedge formation and more sevs than the arch formation. So compared to the other formations, the hollow square formation, you're receiving a bunch more sevs, giving out a bunch more sevs. So this is just going to be preference. You could take these tests and determine your own conclusions. But right now our testing is going to get a little more progressive as these videos go on. There's certain things that we need to test. We first have to take into consideration that we're using one complete tank and one skill damage commander. So our next round of testing, we want to bring out 2 skill damage commanders or 2 tank commanders and see how they perform in specific formations. Right now this information is still incomplete. So once again, I'm going to reiterate, take these reports and come to your own conclusions. I'm not here to tell you which one's which. I'm just doing these testings for the community. So once again, stick around for our next video, which will be skill damage commanders versus this Charles Martel Sun Tzu in different formation combinations. Thanks for stopping in. Please hit a like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you so choose to. Thank you for your time. Muffin.